Welcome to the Friends of NPACE Podcast, brought to you by Haleon. As a leading global consumer healthcare company, Haleon is dedicated to delivering better everyday health with humanity. Known for trusted brands like Advil, Excedrin, and Voltaren, Haleon leverages science, innovation, and human understanding. Haleon is proud to collaborate with NPACE to educate healthcare professionals about our pain portfolio and the latest healthcare information. For more information, visit www.haleonhealthpartners.com.
Hi, everyone. Welcome again to the Friends of NPACE podcast. We are in our student mini-series, and I'm so excited to talk to our guest today because I just think she's a tremendous human and a tremendous asset to not only the NP profession, but to faculty and students everywhere. So this is our Dear Future APP mini-series. Today, I personally and NPACE am honored to welcome Dr. Beth Bigley. She's the executive director of the National Organization of Nurse Practitioner Faculties, or NONPF, as we like to call it. For any of you nurse practitioners out there who are not familiar with the organization, you really should be. They are the people who help the educators in NP tracks. Dr. Bigley is a nationally respected leader in nurse practitioner education and health workforce policy with a career dedicated to strengthening how we prepare the next generation of advanced practice providers. And I'm so grateful for that. Before leading NONPF, she served in senior roles at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, including leadership positions with HRSA and the Office of the U.S. Surgeon General, shaping programs that support nursing education and public health across the nation. She is a fellow of the American Academy of Nursing. Dr. Bigley brings deep policy experience, leadership experience, and a passion for clinical excellence. And she does have a commitment to ensuring NP students have the support they need and that educators do as well. We've been honored to work with her on a big project at NONPF to help teach NP faculty. So I'm so glad to have you. Did I get everything?
I think you did. Thank you. Thank you very much for having me here.
Yes. Beth, I'm so glad you're here. I'm not sure whether I should call you Dr. Bigley or Beth. Which would you prefer?
Beth is just fine.
Perfect. All right, so we're talking about students, and NONPF has something really special for students in regards to clinical. So I know you serve the faculty. Maybe can you share briefly about NONPF's mission and what your role is there and what you do to work for nurse practitioner education?
Oh, sure. So thank you again for having me here. So as you said, I am passionate about NP education. I am passionate about students. I'm passionate about helping our faculty become the best faculty they can. So NONPF has, it's the National Organization of Nurse Practitioner Faculties, called NONPF, has been around for about 70 years, and we're here to serve the faculty. And what I hear from our faculty is that NONPF is the place to be. As you move from your clinical setting into your academic setting, you're going into a new role. You have new things that you need to develop, and it's the place where you're going to be able to find them. So we have everything from materials to help you understand competency-based education, simulation, telehealth, but not just for yourself, but how you're going to translate that to the students. And that's probably the biggest part. It's one thing to be able to practice in these settings, do telehealth, and be involved in simulation, but it's the translation so that you can help the student learners be our future NPs.
I like that. Actually, I was on your site the other day looking at the telehealth information. I was unaware that you had that. I love that you're advancing. You're also into technology in teaching. Did you guys do a conference on AI? Did I miss that?
We did. Last fall, we did a conference. We've had two. Actually, we had a webinar series on AI, and we had a conference on AI in the fall last year. The webinar is up for demand. The conference is actually going to be going up for demand. We're getting our contact hours now, but this is new to faculty, and I think it's so important. It's so important that faculty understand how to use it to help them in their role and be able to translate to students how to use it so that it's ethical, safe, and it helps them with their decision making, and they know, I was watching something just recently. I think it must have been something at our conference, and there's a human part that nurses bring to any clinical setting, and nurse practitioners bring it to any clinical setting. But how do you use AI at the same time to help you with your diagnosis and prescribing, but also remember that there's a human side of this?
I think that's really important. I can't wait to hear those. I'm going to get this series and watch those. How many members does NONPF have currently, just out of curiosity?
Yeah, so NONPF is, it's been around since the 70s. We have representation of faculty in almost every NP school that there is. I just actually got the news data. What we know is there's at least 550 NP programs across the United States. So I'm hoping we have faculty for most of them, at least 95% of them. And we have about 4,000 members. It's our members who create our resources. They're all volunteers. They look at the evidence and they prepare things that they know they need as faculty members in schools.
I like that. You and I have had this discussion a lot. I know, as a former NP faculty member myself and program leader, that the full-time faculty are good, bringing them in and pulling them in. The people who really need to know about NONPF and the resources probably are the adjuncts, the preceptors, the clinical instructors that may just have one course a term or one course a year. They come in and teach pediatrics in a family program because there's no one on. What are your feelings on that before we get into the preceptor portal and how NONPF helps serve that population?
Yeah, so like you, I was a faculty member. I was extremely fortunate in my very junior years to be able to get a fellowship in teaching. And I did a postmaster's fellowship for a year and learned how to be an educator. And I think that when faculty come into these roles as expert clinicians and are pulled in because they're good preceptors and the school knows about them, there's a development phase, and they have to create opportunities for the faculty to be able to develop themselves in this new role as an educator. But I think it goes further than that. Our preceptors are also educators, and sometimes we have to spend time figuring out how to educate them. So I know that, my trajectory of being an educator went like this when I went to this program, and most people learn it at the seat of their pants, doing it and talking to more senior people. But it is it's a new job and it's a new role. So the development is really important. We have with you the new faculty development program. It's an on-demand program. I know I hear about it all the time. In fact, I just heard one school, they are sending all their new faculty to it. I hear how the sessions are just that, what they need to get to that next step of coming in as these expert clinicians to move into their role. Now, the development doesn't end there. We have so much more we need to do and faculty need to do and take it upon themselves as a professional responsibility to grow in their role. But certainly that's the first step, like understand the nuts and bolts of being an educator.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And that's part of why, we developed that new faculty, nurse practitioner faculty educator program, was because there was so much that was out there that even as an educator, I didn't know when I became an NP fac. And I was a nurse practitioner and I had been an educator, and then I became an NP faculty member. And I'm like, I don't know what the standards of practice are. I don't know how to deal with preceptors and clinical. And so you guys do a good job of helping faculty do that. So I'm appreciative. So I want to circle back to the preceptors. Let's talk about them, because everybody's got to have clinical and everybody's got to have a preceptor. Why are preceptors so valuable to the education process?
Oh, they are invaluable to the education process. They're the extension of everything that we do in the classroom. It is the preceptor who's with that student that really moves them in many ways from being their RN to their NP. We rely on our preceptors to challenge our students to make decisions, to use clinical judgment, to stand on their 2 feet and make a plan of care for a patient. We do that in the classroom, but it's different when the patient's sitting in the room right next to it. So helping preceptors sit back, be able to feel that they have the right skills to help the student get there without jumping in and just doing it, I think is probably the most important. It's one of the hardest transitions is moving from an RN to an NP. And our preceptors do that not just with their clinical judgment, but also as mentors or mentees, watching them, seeing how they interact with other staff, with other consultants, I think is all part of it. So they are totally invaluable for this, but they need a lot of help because it's not natural. What's natural to them is being an NP, being able to provide, the care for individuals, families, and populations, not necessarily be that extension, be that facilitator of the student learning.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point there. I have so many thoughts in my head. I think if preceptors they're not just supervising, but they're not also a substitute for the classroom teacher. And they're so critical in observing the things you say, like how well is the communication? How well can they present a patient? How do they work with the CNA in the office? What are their discharge or their home instructions like? How do they think through a differential diagnosis? And there's just all of these pieces to support. Do you think there's pressure for preceptors to pass students? Just a tangential side note, throwing it out there. I want to support our preceptors to say it's okay when someone needs to do something again or spend a little more time, maybe.
Well, that's an interesting concept. So what do we give the preceptors to help them evaluate the student in a way that it is not just passing the student? And I think that's the faculty's role. I mean, to be able to communicate with the preceptor and the student for that matter, as to what the expectations are for that particular clinical. Is it the first level? Is it getting ready to graduate or something in between? So if there's certain things with new students that they're not going to be experts, they're growing in their role and they may be okay for that level of learning, and it's okay to pass the student there. But if you have to see a student in their senior, rotation, and they're acting like it's their first one, then no, I don't think it's okay for the student, for the preceptor to pass them. But it's the expectation and knowing the expectations that are given to them by the faculty, and also the students knowing, what they should be doing in that clinical setting. I mean, sometimes the students have to speak up either for themselves in the clinical setting or go back to the faculty to say, I'm in this rotation and I'm still just following around, holding on to the back tail of the white coat there. And that's not what they're supposed to be doing. So this communication, there's actually a resource on our website. It's sort of the faculty preceptor student checklist is what we call it. And it literally is for faculty to be able to look at preceptors and give to preceptors what they need. And it's also for preceptors to say, I'm not getting this from the faculty member. So it's that triad of, are we communicating? And this is, one of the things we hear from all faculty is the relationship between the faculty member and the preceptor, the communication between the faculty and the preceptor will, one, grow that relationship, secure that relationship, and they're more likely to say yes more often, and even yes to 2 or 3 students once they feel comfortable in the role. So I think takes time to do that. It takes time to build these relationships with the clinical sites, with the preceptors in the clinical sites, but the overall value is unbelievable, because you're not going to have to do that semester after semester. Once that's done, once they understand your program, once they understand what you're asking them to do, they'll be there. And they may want to take a semester off here and there, for a little break, but they'll be back. And I that upfront time is so valuable, just to be able to communicate the program to the preceptor.
Okay. That I drew a triangle and wrote everybody on the thing. I take notes. The audience knows that. I love podcasting because I learned so much. Okay. So on that note, tell me what NONPF has, where it is, who can use it, how do we get to it, and kind of what's contained inside of it.
Sure. So the resources we have for preceptors and faculty who are putting in place these clinical rotations are on our site. It's the new Faculty Preceptor Clinical Hub. I think that's the new name of it.
Okay.
We just took all the material that we had on that website and we looked at it and sorted it so that it was easier. The usability of finding what you wanted was there. Most of the resources that we have are for faculty to give to preceptors. However, there is quite a bit of materials, and there's one on e-learning at the bottom that helps preceptors in their own role, developing themselves as educators. There's also some videos in there which shows, how to deal with a difficult student, how to deal with a different environment, working with children. So there are videos in there directed specifically for preceptors. These are all open. You don't need to be an OFF member,
Okay.
either as a faculty member or a preceptor for that matter, to come on and just link to it. What we know is when faculty give resources to preceptors, they just link to the website so they can go in and watch these videos, look at these materials, and be able to use them as they want to as preceptors. So I think that's like the first step with the two combined. There's also for faculty quite a bit of resources. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. We have, and in fact, the checklist I was talking about talks about the evaluations of evaluating the site, evaluating the student, evaluating the preceptor. We have all of these forms. They're all in fillable forms. All you have to do is download them and utilize them. Take a look at them, make some modifications, and utilize them. So and all the manuals on how to be a preceptor, writing the letters, giving them afterwards. What do we do for preceptors to congratulate them on the time that they've spent with our students? I mean, they spend a lot of time with them, and what do we give to them afterwards? So the letter of appreciation and what goes into that. There's a whole section on what you could be doing to appreciate your preceptors. So it is a lot. There is a lot. We have divided them out so it's a little easier to find. And then you can go to the section and just pull it. And it's all open access. It's not copyrighted. It's not anything that, you have to ask permission. It's there for everybody to use.
Oh, that's so nice. So this is really for faculty, but also preceptors to go and gather. So every practicing NP out there is precepting or has at some point or will. Those are the only kind of nurse practitioners I know. Let's talk a little bit. You had mentioned something before we started about students and student resources. So this is not a place for students to go to find preceptors, which is the ultimate struggle in schools. What kind of advice would you give students looking for that information?
Well, that's a good question. So right now, the standards, the NP, the nurse practitioner standards for quality education states that it's the responsibility of the school, it's the responsibility of the faculty to find clinical sites for preceptors. Now, we know that there are students all over the country that come to programs that are not in their catchment area. So it might be hard for a student that's living in Arkansas that's going to school in North Carolina to that faculty member to find a site there. So, but what's important there is if the student has a relationship with a healthcare system, with NPs, PAs, or physicians that can be their preceptor in their population. So it's primary care to primary care, acute care to acute care, peds to peds. Then they can make recommendations to their faculty, and then the faculty does their due diligence to get a hold of the provider and find out more about them and talk to them about what their responsibilities would be. I mean, especially if they're going to be starting off in having that student right after their health assessment rotation. These are early learners that really need a lot of work and understanding the whole clinical process. So it is fine for students to find their own preceptors. What is not fine is that if the student doesn't find the preceptor, they don't have a site. And that's now a standard, not just with our accreditors and with our quality NPA education document, but also with the Department of Education, that schools are responsible to ensure that students have clinical rotations if it's part of their academic program.
And I love this. This has not been a forever standard, but something that I know you have pushed for, and that's been in desperate need. So thank you for emphasizing that. You mentioned also about resources at AANP for students, and a shout out to AANP and all they're doing for NP students everywhere.
Yes, so AANP just came out with some additional resources. These are not for students, but for preceptors, to preceptor development. And it takes that one step further than what we do. What we have is mostly for faculty to give to preceptors, for faculty to help with the operations of just clinical rotations in general. This is preceptor development. I looked through them when they came out. They're exceptional. I think we want every NP to be a preceptor. We know that one of the biggest barriers is they don't feel equipped to do that. So whatever we can give them so that they feel more comfortable in doing that, I think is really important. We know that the HRSA grantees, and this information is on our website, have these regional collaboratives where they're working with the clinical sites in the schools to develop the preceptors. And I think that's extremely important. We know there's barriers where a preceptor may want a student in their healthcare system will say, we can't because, it's too much time away from you seeing patients. There is evidence that's starting to emerge that that's a myth, that actually by having students, you actually don't affect the bottom line and your coding. And in fact, may actually help it, because when the students are doing the charting, they're more particular about things, and you're more apt to code things that you wouldn't if you were, seeing patients every 15 minutes. And I don't want to have to say rush, but you have a very busy day and you miss things when you're documenting, which in effect is your coding for billing. So there's some evidence that's starting to emerge showing that students may not be that hindrance insofar as the value of the economic value of being in a clinical site. And I hope that pans out big time, because we think that students, preceptors learn from students.
Mm-hmm.
They learn. I mean, they're with technology now changing, with evidence changing, it's really hard for just a practitioner in general to keep up with it. And if you have a student who is kept up with this because they are being taught the new and evolving things every single day, it is a value to the preceptors.
I completely agree. I love that we're using research to find the answers to these questions and to support. There is nothing more thorough than a student coming into your clinic and you precepting them. They do the full assessment. They get all the history. They spend all the time. Those patients really feel like they've been seen. There's not a better thing in the world to do than to precept a student and make your patients feel seen. So I appreciate that we're researching that. Yeah, we've worked with who had a HRSA grant that we've worked with on clinical education.
Louisiana.
Yeah,
Louisiana.
preceptors. Mm-hmm.
The collaboration down there, I think that might be Region 10, but it's multiple states. They have a learning environment where they have these modules for the educators. And this is not just NP educators, this is also undergraduate educators can learn to be a preceptor. And the skills are transferable. I mean, some of this is, how do you help a student develop diagnostic reasoning skills? How do you make them feel? And I always think the word, it's one thing to have competence that you're doing, but it's another thing to feel confident that what you're doing. And we hear from students, and there's been several studies on this, is that they feel that they're competent, but they're not confident. And I think that, again, a preceptor goes a long way in helping with that and reinforcing that what they are doing is what they should be at their level of learning and, getting ready to graduate and are there when it's time to graduate.
Yeah, I completely agree. This whole conversation has made me harken back to over 25 years ago when I was in NP school, and my preceptors were critical, and many of them became mentors, lifelong mentors in the field. And I just had fantastic preceptors. So a shout out to our preceptors. Mary Beth, before we close up, is there anything going on at NONPF, or would you like to tell us anything about NONPF that maybe the audience needs to know, or our goal for NONPF in the next year that you're really championing that all of our APP listeners should hear about?
Sure. So, well, there's always something going on at NONPF. We're always putting out new information. I mean, competency-based education is really exploding. Once we decided as a profession that was going to be the way we were going to educate, there's a lot of people that need to understand that, and not just our faculty, but our preceptors and our clinicians. I think the other thing that's sort of exploding is diagnostic reasoning and understanding the language and the technology around that. And we just finished a series of webinars. They're on demand on understanding the terminology around diagnostic reasoning, and CINM, the Society for Diagnostic Reasoning's framework on that. And the faculty that did this, they're the champions in this. They were the fellows in these societies, and they really understand it. And why it's so important is it's keeping up with our colleagues. Medicine and other professions are going to this model of being able to see patients and diagnose patients. And I think it's important that we don't ignore it, and that we understand, if you're in a clinical setting with a physician that was educated with this model, you have to be able to speak their language. So being able to understand this is really important. So those are available, obviously, for our faculty members, but also for clinicians who need to sort of get this, because they didn't get it when they were in school. This is sort of something that's emerging and changing. And I'm sure you're going to do something on this too.
Yes, I wrote down everything here, but it is the field is constantly changing. So this is why professional development is critical. You never get to stop learning once you're in the profession. Mary Beth, I can't say enough. Just takeaways for the audience from this. One, if you didn't know about NONPF, you know about them now, go check them out. If you do any teaching at all or any precepting, they're an organization that you need to be involved with. Definitely the Faculty and Preceptor Clinical Support Hub that you now have open is just such a wonderful thing. And so people should go check that out. It is open access. Students, AANP has a resource page, but they also, preceptors, have resources for you and videos. Go check it out. Become a member of AANP. It's really important to be involved in the profession. And I just want to say, Dr. Bigley, that there is no one I know who has spent more time dedicating themselves to educating advanced practice providers and nurse practitioners than you have. And so I'm so honored. I know you're very busy that you're here, but everyone should know who Dr. Bigley is. You should look her up. She has led NONPF for a long time, and she continues to be cutting edge. And I'm so grateful for your work at NONPF and leading of that organization. So thank you for being here.
Well, I appreciate you inviting me, and this is a passion. I am an educator at heart, so I think it's really important that we spread this important information. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for being here. Listeners, NPACE, is a proud partner actually with NONPF, and we have a new faculty development learning bundle, and it helps NP faculty understand how to be NP faculty and how to execute that role and to help the students. But be sure to check out all things NPACE at npace.org. You can get to our Learning Center from there. NONPF is also on our faculty and student perks page and partners page. We have our Learning Center at learn.npace.org. We are an ANCC accredited provider of continuing education. We also are providing CME through AAPA, and we offer in-person live conferences and virtual and on demand. So thank you all for being here. Mary Beth, thank you for your work at NONPF, and we will catch you guys in the next episode.